Chapter 1. The party. The ballroom shimmered with gold and silver, like someone had bottled midnight and poured it across the floor. Sean Morris adjusted his tie for the third time, wondering if it was strangling him or if the champagne bubbles in the air were just that thick. He wasn't a party guy, never had been. But Sandra's eyes had lit up when she mentioned her company's New Year's Eve bash. "It's a big deal," she'd said, and Sean wanted to be the kind of man who showed up for the woman he loved. Sandra looked stunning in a deep emerald dress, her laughter floating like music as she introduced him to clusters of co-workers. Sean smiled, shook hands, nodded at jokes he didn't quite catch. He was fine being the outsider, he'd done it before. But then the manager showed up. Greg, tipsy, loud, and wearing a grin that could slice glass, clapped Sean on the back hard enough to jolt his drink. "So this is the famous Sean, the guy who makes, what is it? Widgets? Gadgets? Something boring, right?" The group laughed. Sean smiled thinly. "Product development," he said evenly. "Oh, fancy term for plays with toys, huh?" Greg winked at Sandra. "You must have the patience of a saint." More laughter. Sandra chuckled too, soft but audible. Sean swallowed the sting. One joke, fine. People get loose at parties. The second jab came minutes later, after Greg refilled his glass. "So, Sean, do you need Sandra to explain big words to you? I hear engineers aren't great with feelings." The laughter was louder this time. Sandra laughed again, her hand brushing Greg's arm as if to calm him. But she didn't look at Sean. He felt something cold settle in his chest. The third joke was the nail. "Hey, Sandra, blink twice if you're being held hostage by Mr. Spreadsheet here." The laughter roared. Sandra laughed too, head tilted back, eyes bright. Sean stared at her, and for the first time in 19 months, he wondered if he knew her at all. He didn't make a scene, didn't throw a drink or spit a comeback. He simply set his glass down, adjusted his tie one last time and said, "Excuse me." His voice was calm, almost casual. Then he walked out. The winter air slapped him awake as he stepped onto the street. Fireworks cracked in the distance, painting the sky in colors he didn't care to see. He shoved his hands into his coat pockets and started walking, no destination in mind, just away. Behind him, laughter spilled from the ballroom like broken glass. Chapter 2. The fallout. Sandra Baker woke to the sound of fireworks still popping in the distance, their echoes bouncing off the city like stubborn reminders that the world was celebrating while her stomach churned. The party had blurred into a haze of champagne and chatter, but one detail stood out like a jagged shard: Sean's empty chair. She'd scanned the ballroom after Greg's last joke, expecting to find Sean rolling his eyes in a corner. Instead, she found nothing. No tall frame, no calm smile, no trace of him at all. Her pulse had spiked, and she'd excused herself from the laughter, weaving through clusters of co-workers until the truth hit her. He was gone. Now, at 12:37 a.m., she sat on the edge of her bed, heels kicked off, dress wrinkled, phone in hand. She stared at his contact photo, a candid shot she'd taken on a hike, sunlight catching his hair, and pressed call. The ring felt endless. Then his voice, steady and low, "Hey, Sean." Her throat tightened. "Where are you?" I didn't see you leave." "I left after the third joke," he said. No anger, no raised tone. Just fact. "Didn't want to ruin your night." Sandra blinked hard. "What? Why? Why would you think you'd ruin anything?" "Because I was done," Sean replied. "Done being the punchline while you laughed." The words landed like stones. Sandra opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't think it was that bad," she whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. "That's the problem," Sean said, still calm, still quiet. "You didn't think." Sandra gripped the phone tighter. "Sean, I swear, I wasn't laughing at you. I was just, God, I don't know, trying to keep things light." "Light for who?" His tone sharpened, just a fraction. "Because it wasn't light for me." Her chest burned. She wanted to explain, to rewind the night, to tell him she'd been caught off guard, that Greg was her boss and she didn't know how to shut him down without making a scene. But all of that sounded like excuses, and Sean hated excuses. "I'm sorry," she said finally, voice cracking. "I didn't mean." "I know," Sean cut in. "But it happened. And it told me something I can't ignore." Sandra's breath hitched. What did it tell you?" "That maybe you don't see me the way I thought you did." Pause, heavy as winter fog. "I need space, Sandra." The silence stretched until it felt unbearable. Fireworks boomed outside, mocking her with their cheer. "Space," she repeated, numb. "Okay. Good night," Sean said, and the line went dead. Sandra stared at the phone until the screen dimmed, her reflection ghostly in the black glass. She felt the weight of 19 months pressing down, splintering under the force of 3 stupid jokes and 3 careless laughs. And for the first time since she met Sean Morris, she wondered if she'd lost him for good. Chapter 3. Reflection. Sandra didn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every laugh, every glance, every careless second from the party. The memory looped like a cruel highlight reel. Greg's smirk, the roar of her coworkers, her own voice, bright and oblivious, joining in. At the time, it had felt harmless, just office banter. Now, in the quiet of her apartment, it felt like betrayal. She rose before dawn, padding barefoot to the kitchen. The city outside was still draped in the remnants of celebration. Confetti on sidewalks, champagne bottles tipped like fallen soldiers. Sandra brewed coffee she didn't want just for something to do. Her phone sat on the counter, silent, as if mocking her hope for a message that wouldn't come. Sean's words echoed. Maybe you don't see me the way I thought you did. She gripped the edge of the counter until her knuckles whitened. He wasn't wrong. She hadn't seen him, not really, when Greg started his drunken performance. She'd seen her boss, her coworkers, the fragile web of office politics she'd been balancing for years. She'd laughed because it was easier than pushing back. Easier than risking Greg's temper or her team's judgment. But easy had cost her something far more precious. Sandra opened her laptop, searching for distraction, but every email subject blurred into meaninglessness. She closed it again and stared at the blank wall, wondering how 19 months of love could feel so fragile overnight. Across town, Sean Morris was hiking a trail dusted with frost, boots crunching against the earth. He'd woken before sunrise, restless, and driven out to the hills where silence was honest and air was sharp enough to clear his head. The sky was pale blue, streaked with pink, and the cold bit at his cheeks, but he welcomed it. It was better than the heat simmering in his chest. He wasn't angry, not in the way people expected. Sean didn't shout or slam doors. When anger came, it settled deep, like a stone in water, pulling everything else down with it. He thought about the party, about Greg's smirk, about Sandra's laughter ringing like bells in the wrong cathedral. He thought about respect, how it wasn't optional, how it wasn't negotiable. You don't let people tear down the person you claim to love. And you sure as hell don't laugh while they do it. Sean paused at the crest of the hill, breath fogging in the icy air. He loved Sandra. That hadn't changed. But love without respect, that was a house built on sand. And last night, the tide had come in. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over her name. He could text her. Something simple, something soft. But what would he say? I'm fine? That would be a lie. We'll talk later? Later felt like a cliff he wasn't ready to climb. So he slid the phone back into his pocket and kept walking, boots crunching, heart heavy. Back in her apartment, Sandra opened a blank document and typed 2 words. I'm sorry. Then deleted them. Too small. Too late. She needed more than an apology. She needed a plan. A way to show him that last night wasn't who she was. That she could fight for him, even if it meant facing Greg and the fallout at work. Sandra closed the laptop and whispered to the empty room. I'll fix this. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. Because fixing it meant more than words. It meant proving she deserved the man who walked away without looking back. Chapter 4. The silent week. The first day was the hardest. Sandra woke up expecting a text, a call, a sign that Sean hadn't closed the door completely. Instead, her phone stayed stubbornly silent, its screen as blank as her appetite. She typed a message, can we talk? Then deleted it. Typed again, I miss you, and deleted that too. Everything sounded desperate, and desperation wasn't going to fix this. By Monday, she settled on something neutral. Hope you're okay. She hit send before she could overthink it. His reply came hours later, short and polite. I'm fine. Busy with work. No emoji, no warmth. Just words that felt like a wall. Sandra stared at the message until her eyes burned. Busy with work. Sean wasn't lying. He lived for his projects. But she knew him well enough to hear what he wasn't saying. He was keeping distance. Space like he'd asked for. And she hated how much it hurt. The week crawled forward. Each day a quiet ache. Sandra threw herself into her job. But even the endless emails and meetings couldn't drown out the memory of his voice. Calm. Clipped. Final. She avoided Greg like the plague, ducking into side halls when she heard his booming laugh. She couldn't look at him without tasting regret. On Wednesday night, she sat at her kitchen table with a glass of wine and her best friend, Chloe, on speaker. Chloe didn't sugarcoat. She never had. You messed up, Chloe said bluntly. Big time. Sandra winced. Thanks for the pep talk. I'm serious, San. You laughed. In front of him, while your boss treated him like a joke. That's not just awkward, that's disrespect. Sandra pressed her forehead to her palm. I know. God, I know. I didn't think. That's the problem, Chloe cut in. You didn't think about him. You thought about Greg. About your job. About keeping the peace. And now you're paying for it. Sandra swallowed hard. So what do I do? First, stop texting him like you're checking on a sick goldfish. He's not fine. He's hurt. You need to show him you get it. Sandra stared at the wine swirling in her glass. How? Start with an apology that doesn't sound like a Hallmark card, Chloe said. And then figure out why Greg was gunning for him. Because trust me, Sean noticed. Sandra's pulse quickened. She hadn't thought about that, why Greg had zeroed in on Sean like a target. It wasn't random. Greg wasn't that creative. There was a reason, and she needed to find it. After the call ended, Sandra sat in silence, Chloe's words echoing in her head. Show him you get it. She opened her laptop, typed a few lines, deleted them, Typed again. Nothing felt right. Words were easy. Proving them, that was the hard part. Across town, Sean sat in his apartment, laptop open, blueprints glowing on the screen. He'd buried himself in work, chasing deadlines like they were lifelines. But every so often, his focus slipped, and he saw Sandra's face, laughing, oblivious, beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. He hated that he missed her. Hated that missing her didn't erase the sting. He closed the laptop and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Space was supposed to help. So why did it feel like punishment? Chapter 5. The unexpected meeting, Saturday morning, found Sandra standing in line at Brew and Bean, the cozy coffee shop tucked between a florist and a bookstore on Maple Street. She wasn't here by accident. Not really. She knew Sean came here on weekends, had known since their early dates when he'd wax poetic about the perfect crema, like it was a rare gemstone. She told herself she wasn't stalking him. She was creating an opportunity, a chance to talk without the sterile chill of text messages. The bell above the door jingled, and her pulse spiked. Sean walked in, tall and composed, wearing that navy jacket she'd bought him last Christmas. His hair was slightly tousled, like he'd just come from the gym, and his expression was unreadable, calm, but distant. He didn't see her at first. She had a split second to decide. Hide behind the pastry case or face him head-on. She chose head-on. "Sean," she said, voice steadier than she felt. His gaze landed on her, and for a moment, something flickered. Surprise, maybe. But then his face settled into polite neutrality. "Sandra." The single word felt like a handshake with gloves on. No warmth, no sting. Just formal. "I didn't know you'd be here," she lied, and hated herself for it. Sean's brow lifted slightly, but he didn't call her out. "I come here most Saturdays." "I remember," she said softly, then cleared her throat. "How have you been?" "Busy," he replied, stepping forward as the line moved. "Work's been intense." Sandra nodded, fumbling for words. "Yeah, same here. Lots of year-end stuff." The silence stretched, awkward and heavy. She wanted to fill it, to spill every apology she'd rehearsed, but the setting felt wrong. Too public, too fragile. Still, she couldn't let him walk away without trying. "Sean," she began, heart pounding. "About the party." He held up a hand, not harsh, just firm. "Sandra, I know what you're going to say. Do you?" Her voice cracked, and she hated that it did. "Because I need you to hear it." Sean studied her for a long moment, then nodded toward an empty table by the window. "5 minutes," he said. "Then I have to go." Sandra exhaled like she'd been underwater. They sat across from each other, coffee cups between them like neutral territory. Outside, snowflakes drifted lazily, oblivious to the storm brewing inside her chest. "I'm sorry," she said, words tumbling out. "Not just for laughing, for not seeing what was happening. Greg was out of line and I should have shut it down. I didn't because I was worried about work, about making a scene, and that was selfish. You deserved better." Sean listened, expression calm but guarded. "You're right," he said finally. "You should have had my back." Sandra nodded, throat tight. "I know, and I want to fix this. If you'll let me." Sean leaned back, eyes searching hers. "Sandra, trust isn't something you patch with words. It's built or rebuilt with actions." "I'll prove it," she said, voice steady now. "Just don't give up on me yet." For the first time in days, his mouth curved. Not a smile, not really, but something softer than before. "We'll see," he said, standing. "Take care, Sandra." And then he was gone, leaving her with a cooling cup of coffee and a flicker of hope that felt both fragile and fierce. Chapter 6. The manager's motive. Sandra waited until Monday afternoon, when Greg's office door stood open and his booming laugh had finally faded down the hall. She'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times in her head, each version sharper than the last, but now that she was here, heels clicking on the polished floor, heart pounding like a drum, her throat felt dry. Greg looked up from his desk, grinning like they were old pals. "Sandra, survived the party." "Huh? Hell of a night." "Yeah," she said evenly, stepping inside. "Can we talk?" His grin faltered just enough to notice. "Sure. What's up?" Sandra closed the door behind her. The click sounded louder than it should have. She sat across from him, spine straight, voice calm. "About the party. About the jokes." Greg chuckled, waving a hand. "Oh, come on. It was all in good fun. Sean's a big guy. He can take a little ribbing." Her jaw tightened. "3 jokes, Greg. All aimed at him. And you didn't just rib him, you went for his work, his intelligence, his relationship. That's not fun. That's disrespect." Greg leaned back, smirk returning like armor. "You're really worked up about this." "I am," Sandra said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Because Sean is important to me, and what you did wasn't okay." For a moment, Greg studied her, the smirk slipping into something cooler. "You know," he said slowly, "I didn't think you'd care that much." Sandra frowned. "Why wouldn't I?" Greg shrugged, eyes narrowing just slightly. "Because I figured you'd want someone a little more impressive. Someone who fits in with this crowd." The words hit like ice water. Sandra stared at him, disbelief curdling into anger. Excuse me? Greg spread his hands, feigning innocence. Look, Sandra, you're sharp, ambitious. You could do better than a guy who spends his life tinkering with gadgets. Her pulse roared in her ears. So that's what this was? You humiliated him because you think he's not good enough for me? Greg didn't answer right away. His silence was confirmation enough. Sandra stood, voice steady but cold. Let me make this clear. Sean is more than good enough. He's the best man I know and certainly a better man than you. And if you ever pull something like that again, I won't just walk out of your party. I'll walk out of this company, but not before filing a lawsuit for harassment. Greg's brows shot up, but she didn't wait for a reply. She turned on her heel and left, heart pounding, fury burning through the shame she'd carried all week. For the first time since New Year's Eve, she felt something like clarity. Greg's motives weren't about humor, they were about ego. And she wasn't going to let his insecurity wreck what mattered most. Outside, the winter air bit at her cheeks, but she welcomed it. She pulled out her phone, thumb hovering over Sean's name. She wanted to tell him everything, to prove she'd fought for him. But not yet, not in a text. This needed more than words on a screen. Sandra slipped the phone back into her pocket and walked toward the parking lot, her resolve hardening with every step. She had a plan now, and she wasn't giving up. Chapter 7. The Olive Branch. Sandra sat at her dining table late Sunday night, a single lamp casting a warm circle of light over the blank sheet of stationery. Her laptop was closed, her phone face down. No distractions, just her and the silence, and the weight of 19 months balanced on the tip of a pen. She'd tried texting. She'd tried calling. None of it felt enough. Words on a screen were disposable, easy to ignore. But a letter? That was deliberate, tangible. Something Sean could hold, read, reread. Something that said, I'm not giving up. She uncapped the pen and stared at the page, heart thudding. Then she began. Sean, I've spent the last week replaying that night like a bad movie I can't turn off. Every laugh, every glance, every second I should have stood up for you and didn't. I keep asking myself why, and the answer makes me sick. I was worried about Greg, about my job, about keeping the peace. And in doing that, I broke something far more important. Your trust. You were right. Respect isn't optional. And I failed you. I confronted Greg today. He admitted what I should have seen. Those jokes weren't random. They were meant to tear you down because he thinks you're not impressive enough for me. I told him he was wrong. I told him you're the best man I know. And I meant every word. I can't undo what happened, but I can promise this. I will never let anyone treat you that way again. Not Greg. Not anyone. You deserve someone who fights for you, and I want to be that person. If you're willing, I'd like to talk. No pressure, no expectations, just talk. Because I miss you, Sean. More than I can put in this letter. Sandra. She read it twice, then folded the page carefully, sliding it into an envelope. Her handwriting wasn't perfect, slanted, a little rushed, but it was hers, honest, vulnerable in a way texts could never be. The next morning, she drove to Sean's building, heart pounding like a drumline. She didn't ring his buzzer, didn't risk an awkward doorstep scene. Instead, she slipped the envelope into his mailbox and whispered to the cold air, "Please read it." Then she walked away, boots crunching on the frosted sidewalk, hope flickering like the pale winter sun. That night, Sean came home late, shoulders heavy from a day of deadlines and meetings. He sorted through the usual stack of bills and flyers, then froze at the sight of the envelope. His name, written in Sandra's familiar script. He carried it inside like it was fragile, set it on the table, and stared at it for a long moment before sliding a finger under the flap. The paper unfolded, and her words spilled out, raw, unpolished, real. By the time he reached the last line, his chest felt tight. He didn't know what to do yet, didn't know if trust could be rebuilt. But for the first time in days, he felt something other than anger. He felt possibility. Chapter 8. The turning point. Sean stared at the letter again on Thursday night, its creases softening from how many times he'd unfolded it. He didn't know why he kept reading it. Maybe because every line sounded like Sandra, the Sandra he'd fallen for. Honest, determined, a little stubborn. He wasn't ready to forgive, not completely. But the anger had thinned, leaving room for something else, curiosity. Could she really mean what she wrote? Could they find their way back? He set the letter down and opened his calendar. Tomorrow was the product launch, a big one. Months of work culminating in a sleek new design that would hit the market before spring. He'd planned to go solo, keep it strictly professional. But as he stared at the invite list, a thought nudged him. Maybe this was the right moment to see Sandra face to face. Neutral ground. No champagne, no Greg, no laughter at his expense. Just him, his work, and her if she wanted to show up. Sean typed a message, hesitated, then hit send. Sean, launch event tomorrow at 6. If you want to come, you're welcome. Sandra saw the text while she was in line at the grocery store, and her breath caught so hard she almost dropped her basket. She read it twice, 3 times, heart racing. It wasn't warm, wasn't romantic, but it was an opening. A door cracked just enough for hope to slip through. She typed back quickly, fingers trembling. Sandra, I'd love to. Thank you. The next evening, Sandra stood outside the glass doors of the downtown venue, nerves buzzing like static. Inside, the space gleamed with modern displays and soft lighting, a crowd milling around prototypes and cocktail tables. She smoothed her navy dress, professional but chic, and stepped in, scanning for Sean. She spotted him near the main display, talking with two colleagues. He looked sharp in a tailored charcoal suit, posture confident, voice steady. This was his world, and he owned it. For a moment, Sandra just watched, pride swelling in her chest. Greg's words from last week echoed, "You could do better," and she almost laughed. Better than Sean? Impossible. When Sean turned and saw her, his expression shifted. Surprise first, then something softer, though guarded. He excused himself from the group and walked over, hands in his pockets. "You came," he said, voice calm but not cold. "I said I would," Sandra replied, matching his tone. "This looks amazing, Sean. Really." His mouth curved slightly, the ghost of a smile. "Thanks. It's been a long road." They stood there for a beat, the hum of conversation around them, the weight of unspoken things pressing between them. Sandra wanted to reach out to bridge the gap, but she held back. This wasn't the moment for grand gestures. It was a moment for listening. Sean gestured toward the display. "Want me to show you what we've been working on?" "I'd love that," she said, and followed him through the exhibit. As he explained the design, his voice animated, eyes bright, Sandra felt the tension ease, thread by thread. This was the man she knew, passionate, meticulous, quietly brilliant. And for the first time since New Year's Eve, she saw a flicker of warmth in his gaze when it met hers. Later, as the event wound down, they stood near the exit, coats in hand. Sean hesitated, then said, "Thanks for coming." Sandra smiled, small but sincere. "Thanks for inviting me." He nodded, and for a moment, it felt like the air between them wasn't heavy anymore, just fragile, like glass that could hold if handled with care. Chapter 9. The Comedy of Errors. Sandra arrived at Sean's office the following Friday, invited for a casual meet and greet with his team after the successful launch. She'd spent the morning rehearsing small talk in her head, determined to make a good impression. This wasn't about winning over his colleagues. It was about showing Sean she respected his world, his work, and the people who mattered to him. The office was sleek and modern, all glass walls and clean lines. Sean greeted her in the lobby, looking effortlessly sharp in a crisp white shirt and navy slacks. His smile, small but real, made her pulse skip. "Glad you could make it," he said, leading her toward the break area where a few team members were gathered around a coffee station. Sandra smiled back. "Wouldn't miss it." The introductions went smoothly at first. Sean's colleagues were friendly, curious, and clearly proud of the recent launch. Sandra asked questions, laughed at the right moments, and even managed to compliment the design without sounding like she'd memorized a press release. For a few blissful minutes, everything felt normal. Then came the coffee. Sandra, eager to keep the conversation flowing, offered to refill Sean's cup. She grabbed the carafe, tilted it, and realized too late that the lid wasn't secure. A tidal wave of steaming coffee cascaded out, splashing across the counter, the floor, and horror of horrors, the VP's pristine beige blazer. "Oh my God!" Sandra gasped, dropping the carafe with a clatter. I'm so sorry." The VP froze, coffee dripping from their sleeve like liquid shame. Sean's team stared, wide-eyed. Sandra scrambled for napkins, knocking over a sugar jar in the process. It shattered, sending crystals skittering across the floor like mocking applause. "I'll clean this up," Sandra babbled, blotting at the blazer with frantic energy. "It'll come out, I swear. Coffee's practically water, right?" "Well, not really, but—" "Sandra," Sean said, voice calm but firm. "Stop." She froze, napkin in hand, cheeks blazing. I just wanted to help." For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy. Then Sean chuckled, low, warm, unexpected. The sound rippled through the room, breaking the tension like sunlight through clouds. His team laughed too, the VP waving off the mess with good-natured grace. "It's fine," Sean said, taking the napkin gently from her hand. "Really, happens all the time." Sandra stared at him, stunned. He was smiling, actually smiling, and for the first time in weeks the weight in her chest lifted. "I guess I made an impression," she said weakly. Sean's grin widened. "You definitely did." As the team dispersed to salvage what was left of the coffee station, Sean leaned closer, voice low enough for her alone. "You know," he murmured, "I haven't laughed like that in a while." Sandra's heart thudded. "Glad I could provide entertainment." He shook his head, eyes warm now. "Glad you're here." And just like that, the ice between them cracked, not with grand speeches or perfect timing, but with spilled coffee and laughter that felt like home. Chapter 10. The honest talk. The coffee fiasco had left Sandra mortified, but it had also cracked something open, a door she thought might never budge. Sean had laughed, not politely, not out of obligation, but genuinely, and that laugh had lingered in her mind all week like a melody she couldn't stop humming. Now, Friday night, They sat across from each other at a quiet corner table in a neighborhood bistro. No champagne towers, no colleagues, no Greg. Just two people and the low hum of conversation around them. Sean had suggested dinner, his idea, not hers, and that alone felt monumental. Sandra wrapped her hands around her water glass, steadying herself. "Thanks for inviting me," she said softly. Sean nodded, eyes calm but intent. "I figured we should talk. Really talk." She swallowed hard. "I want that." The waiter came and went, leaving menus they barely glanced at. When the silence stretched, Sean broke it first. "I've been thinking," he said, voice even, "about what happened. About us." Sandra's chest tightened. "Me too." He leaned forward slightly, forearms resting on the table. "Sandra, I need you to understand something. Respect isn't negotiable for me. It's not about pride, it's about trust. If I'm with someone, I need to know they've got my back. Always." Sandra nodded quickly, words tumbling out. "I know, and I failed you that night. I was so focused on keeping Greg happy, on avoiding drama, that I didn't see what it cost. You, us." Sean's gaze softened, but his tone stayed firm. "Why didn't you say something to him?" Her throat tightened. "Because I was scared. Greg's my boss. He's influential. I thought if I pushed back, it would make things worse for me at work." Sean studied her for a long moment. "I get that. But here's the thing. If you're scared to stand up for me, what does that say about us?" The question landed like a weight. Sandra blinked hard, fighting the sting in her eyes. "It says I need to be braver," she whispered. "And I will be." "I confronted him, Sean, after the party. He admitted why he did it, because he thinks you're not good enough for me." Her voice sharpened. "I told him he was wrong." Sean's brows lifted slightly. "You did." "I did," she said, steady now. "And I meant it. You're the best man I know. I should have shown that sooner." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. Then Sean exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. "I appreciate that," he said. "But this isn't just about Greg. It's about us. If we're gonna make this work, we need boundaries. Loyalty. No gray areas." Sandra nodded, heart pounding. "I want that too. Tell me what you need." Sean's eyes held hers, steady and clear. "I need to know you'll stand with me, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs something." Sandra reached across the table, fingers brushing his hand. "Then that's what I'll do. No excuses. No hesitation." His hand closed around hers, warm and solid. For the first time since New Year's Eve, the distance between them felt like something they could cross. The waiter returned, menus in hand, but neither of them looked up. They were too busy holding on quietly, fiercely, to the fragile thread they'd just begun to mend. Chapter 11. The grand gesture. Sandra stood on the rooftop terrace, the city lights glittering like scattered jewels beneath a velvet sky. The winter air was crisp, but the heaters she'd rented glowed warmly, casting halos of light over the small table set for two. White linen, flickering candles, a bottle of Sean's favorite wine chilling in a silver bucket. It wasn't extravagant, just intimate, thoughtful, hers. She checked her watch for the 10th time. Sean would be here soon. She'd texted him earlier. "I'd like to see you tonight. My treat. No surprises, just us." He'd replied with a simple okay. That single word had sent her heart into overdrive. Sandra smoothed the tablecloth, adjusted the candles, and whispered to herself, "Please let this work." The elevator doors slid open behind her, and she turned. Sean stepped out, tall and composed, his breath fogging in the cold. He wore a charcoal coat, his hands tucked into his pockets, and for a moment he just stood there, taking in the scene. "You did all this?" he asked, voice low, almost incredulous. Sandra nodded, nerves buzzing like electricity. "I wanted something quiet, something that's just for us." Sean walked closer, eyes sweeping over the table, the candles, the skyline. "It's beautiful," he said softly. Relief washed through her like warmth. "Thank you for coming." He shrugged lightly, but his gaze held hers. "I was curious." They sat, and Sandra poured the wine, her hands steady now. Conversation started slow. Safe topics, work updates, the weather. But soon, laughter slipped in, easy and unforced. When Sean teased her about the coffee disaster, she groaned and threw a napkin at him, and he laughed. A real laugh, rich and warm, the kind that made her chest ache with hope. As the night deepened, Sandra grew quiet, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. "Sean," she said softly, "I need you to know something." He looked at her, waiting. "I love you," she said, voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "I've loved you for a long time, and I know I messed up, but I'm not afraid anymore. Not of Greg, not of anyone. If someone disrespects you, they disrespect me, and I won't let that happen again." Sean's expression shifted, surprise first, then something deeper, something that softened the edges of his guarded calm. He didn't speak right away, and the silence stretched like a held breath. Then he reached across the table, his hand closing over hers, warm and solid. "I missed this," he said quietly. "I missed us." Sandra's throat tightened. Does that mean? It means, Sean said, squeezing her hand. I'm willing to try, if you are. Sandra smiled, tears pricking her eyes. I am. Above them, the city hummed, and for the first time since New Year's Eve, Sandra felt like the world had tilted back into place. Chapter 12. The New Beginning. The rooftop was different this time, warmer, softer, alive with the glow of string lights draped like constellations across the terrace. A year had passed since Sandra's grand gesture, and now, on New Year's Day, the city stretched beneath them like a promise. The air was crisp, but not biting, and the hum of distant celebrations floated up from the streets below. Sandra stood by the railing, a glass of champagne in hand, watching fireworks bloom in bursts of crimson and gold. Behind her, Sean adjusted the Bluetooth speaker, queuing up a playlist that had become theirs, songs from road trips, lazy Sundays, and quiet nights when laughter had filled the spaces where silence used to live. He walked over, slipping an arm around her waist. You're quiet, he said softly. Sandra smiled, leaning into him. Just thinking. Dangerous, he teased, and she laughed. The sound light, easy, nothing like the brittle laughter of a year ago. She turned to face him, her eyes catching the shimmer of city lights. Do you remember last New Year's? Sean's brow arched. The party? Hard to forget. Sandra winced playfully. I still cringe when I think about it. He chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. We survived. More than survived, she said, her voice warm. We rebuilt. Sean nodded, his gaze steady. Because you fought for it. Sandra's throat tightened. Because we both did. They clinked glasses, the soft chime ringing like a vow. Around them, fireworks painted the sky in wild colors, but neither looked away. The world could explode in glitter and noise, and it wouldn't matter. Not when this moment felt like everything they'd been chasing. Sean set his glass down and reached into his coat pocket. Sandra's breath caught when he pulled out a small velvet box. Not flashy, not oversized, just simple and perfect. He opened it to reveal a ring that gleamed like starlight. Her hand flew to her mouth. Sean, he smiled, calm and certain. No speeches, no big production. Just this, I love you, I trust you, and I want forever with you. Sandra's eyes blurred with tears, but her voice was clear. Yes, she whispered, then louder, laughing through the tears. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and the world seemed to tilt. Not like it had a year ago in chaos and doubt, but in a way that felt right. Solid. Unshakable. Above them, the final firework burst into 1,000 sparks, and Sandra thought, this is what new beginnings look like. Not perfect, not easy, but worth every fight. Chapter 13. Epilogue. 6 months later, Sean Morris stood in the kitchen of their new apartment, sleeves rolled up, wrestling with a stubborn cork in a bottle of wine. Sandra leaned against the counter, grinning as she watched him mutter under his breath like the cork had personally insulted him. You know, she teased. For a guy who designs cutting-edge products, you're losing to a piece of wood. Sean shot her a look, deadpan. This cork is defective. Sure, she said, biting back a laugh. It's the cork's fault. He finally popped it free with a triumphant thunk, sending a splash of wine onto his shirt. Sandra burst out laughing, and Sean shook his head, grinning despite himself. Don't say it, he warned. Oh, I'm saying it, she replied, eyes sparkling. You're lucky you're cute. Sean poured the wine, sliding a glass toward her. You're lucky you're funny. She raised her glass, arching a brow. Funny enough to make you laugh at a coffee disaster? He chuckled, the memory still vivid. That was legendary. Sandra clinked her glass against his. To disasters that turn into second chances. To second chances, Sean echoed, his gaze warm and steady. They sipped, and for a moment, the world felt perfectly ordinary. Two people sharing wine in a kitchen, laughter curling through the air like steam. But ordinary was exactly what Sandra loved now. Ordinary meant trust. Ordinary meant home. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Chloe. So, when's the wedding? Sandra laughed, showing Sean the screen. He smirked. Tell her we're still negotiating the guest list. Sandra grinned. And the coffee station. Sean groaned. Never again. They laughed together, the sound rich and easy, filling the space where silence used to live. Outside, the city lights shimmered, and Sandra thought, this isn't the end of the story. It's the start of every chapter that matters.